Hello, folks. I am your host, the Dynamite Crip, and today on Comic Fever, have I got something for you. X-Men Blue, number 11, the non-spoiler review. Uh, First up, the cover art, uh, I think is amazing. I especially like the new look of Storm. Uh, the only part I would have The only problem I would have with this book is, and I'm kind of getting into spoiler territory here, but um, I'm guessing that is supposed to be Beast, and if it is, then um, I don't really like how they have uh, two different um, forms of him. Uh, if you want to know what I mean by that, I suggest watching the actual spoiler area, but all in all, I think it's a good book. I think it's a nice read. I think Guru EFX does a great job with the light and dark tones of the book, and the all around art to me is awesome. Uh, Again, I'm not much in the way of artists. I couldn't tell you the difference between Arthur Adams and uh, Colin Bunn, but uh, yeah, I couldn't tell you the difference between them, other than the fact that one's a letterer and one's a writer and one's a artist. But I couldn't tell you the difference between artists, to be honest. But anyway, this book is a good book, um, in my opinion. Anyway, that is the uh, non-spoiler review. I'm sorry that it was so short, but really, not a whole much to say that doesn't go into spoiler territory. So, without further ado, to those of you who will leave at this marking point, I say, I'll see you on the other side. Now, those of you who have decided to stay, welcome to X-Men Blue 11 spoiler review. Uh, Story arc is called uh, uh, Toil and Trouble. This is part 2. Uh, Cast of characters, as I always do at the beginning of this. Marvel Girl, Jean Grey, Cyclops, Scott Summers, Angel, Warren Worthington III, Beast, Hank McCoy, Iceman, Bobby Drake, and lastly, Jimmy Hudson, who again has gone with um, with no code name. And I gotta admit, I'm kind of not liking that. Anyway, we open up with a close up of the Goblin Queen. Her pink fog all around her. A narration begins and talks about how she came to be. It says, "Once upon a time, I was known by a different name. I was called Madeline Pryor." Most of the X-Men sprawled out all over the place. Narration continues, saying such a weak and human name. It leaves a rancid taste on the tongue. The Hexmen crawling and gnashing their teeth. The narration goes on. "Now, though, I am the Goblin Queen." Hank, in his new ghastly form, charges the remaining X-Men, Marvel Girl and Cyclops. More narration. "I do bad things, and I like it. And today, the very bad thing I'm doing." A close-up of the razor-sharp teeth of the beast. The Goblin Queen continues, is pitting X-Men against X-Men. The next page, it is a wide shot of the X-Men, where Hexmen and X-Men, what's left of the X-Men, is a battle scene. The Goblin Queen finishes her inner monologue and says, "It's a fun gig if you can get it, but it's a very competitive field." To the Hexmen, she says, kill them all, Hexmen, but save as much of their blood as you can. I plan on repainting the mansion's main suite." Cyclops, shooting out one of his optic beams at Beast, says, "I'm sorry about this, Hank." Cyclops, blasting Beast, tossing him back, and then says, "But really, you brought this on yourself." Jean, fighting off one of the major demons, Jean says, "Scott, I can't slow Edgar Rice Burroughs' Colossus down." Why that was important to point out, I don't know. But Jean dodges one of Colossus, draped in a new battle armor, complete with shield and sword, swipes of his sword. Jean screams, "Ah!" A close-up on Cyclops, shooting one of his optic beams now at Colossus. Colossus, taking the blast nonchalantly, says, "I have cut through the fires of hell. Your paltry attack barely tickles." The next page, reflecting the optic beam, blasting Cyclops with his own beam. Cyclops wails, "Argh!" Cyclops raising a hand up, trying to protect himself, as Colossus raises his sword over his head. Cyclops says, "Colossus, it is you, right? Why are you attacking us?" Narration starts for Colossus, saying, "My name is Pietro Rasputin. In the darkness of a world between this heaven and hell, known as Limbo." Looking down at his sister, his hand over his eye, his narration continues. "I ventured into Limbo to rescue my sister. In my journey, I faced many ordeals, but none so crushing as finding out that my poor Liliana was already dead." Back to the X-Mansion and Colossus, his sword over his head, about to strike Cyclops. The illusion of Liliana appears and says, "Colossus, no, don't." Colossus grabs his head in pain. He says, "Snowflake, it cannot be." Cyclops says, "Thanks for the save, Jean." Cyclops is whisked away, and his captor says, "You think you're safe? Rest assured, you are not." Caught off guard, Cyclops says, "Yee, who?" Narration begins. "I'm called Bloodstorm, but at one time I was called Aurora." It flashes to a time when she was a pickpocket, and then an evil-looking man she decided to pick. Narration says, "A streetwise thief who chose the wrong pocket to pick." Flying through the air with Cyclops as her capture, her narration continues. "But now I am more than thief, more than mutant." Bloodstorm's hands move from Cyclops' shoulders to around his neck. She finishes her narration with, "Then human." Cyclops being strangled, says, Hey, watch it. Cyclops turns around and blasts Bloodstorm. Tossing her back, she screams, "Ah!" The next page, Cyclops falling through the air. Jean yells, "I got you, Slim." Cyclops says, "Thanks again." "Watch out, you've got," Cyclops screams. "Incoming." As a smoke bomb is tossed at her by some winged woman. Jean cough as the air fills with smoke. Narration begins on this woman. Once upon a time, my name was Megan Gwynn. Megan Gwynn was going to be one of the X-Men. Megan in a hallway surrounded by demons. Her narration continues. And then the second inferno erupted, and my life literally went to hell. I was captured, tortured, and possessed. The image of the Dark Phoenix is in front of Jean. Her head turned away, her hand up to shield her eyes. She says, "No." The next page, Cyclops shoots one of his optic beams at Megan Gwynn and yells at Jean, "Whatever you're seeing, Jean, it's not real." Jean turns away, and behind her and Scott is one of the demons. She says, "Is that real?" Nightcrawler is surrounded by fire and demons. Narration says, "No, no, 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 no. Oh, no, no, no. Gott in Himmel. Don't let this happen to me." Jean and Scott confronted by a whale-looking demon. Jean says, "Scott, I'm trying to send out a psychic distress signal, but something is blocking me. I think maybe." The next page, a psychic force bubble shield encapsulating Jean and Scott. Jean finishes her thought. "It's the Goblin Queen." Scott says, "I see her. I think I can break her concentration and get you a window of time, but I don't have a clear shot at her." Jean and Scott look at each other. Jean says, "You thinking what I'm thinking?" Scott replies, "Of course I am." Scott, hand to his goggles, lets out an optic beam. As he does, he says, "Light show special?" The beam bounces off one demon to another. Jean struggles to keep up the force field and creature bumpers. For Scott says, "This better," she says, "this better work. Creating TK bumpers is one thing, but to do it and to keep a dragon at bay is an altogether different thing." The next page, a beam whizzes past Colossus. Beast charges at Jean and Scott. The Goblin Queen is knocked down and screams, "Ah!" Jean, eyes blazing with pink lightning, says, "That's it. Hold on, Scott. We're out of here." Then bamf. The next page, Jean and Scott materialize in an alleyway. After the smoke of their teleportation disappears, Scott says, "Pickles?" Jean says, "That's right. I just gave him a psychic whistle and he bamfed us right out of there." Jean goes on, "He forgives you for chasing him, by the way." Scott, walking off, says, "Yeah, that's great." Scott, Scott, Scott looking back at Jean, finishing her thought, and says, "What do we do now?" Bobby, Magneto, Polaris, they're still at the mansion. And Hank, Jean with pickles on her back, says, "I'll try to find Jimmy and Warren, but without Cerebro." The next page, Jean finishes what she says. "They may be out of range." In a bunker deep beneath Arrow Ridge, Colorado, Angel, Jimmy, and Kara walking down some steps in a dark room. Kara says, "A couple of decades ago, this used to be the home of a doomsday cult. The sheriff at the time, along with the ATF, ran them off. I remember hearing about it on the news. The things that happened here, just awful." Jimmy, looking back over his shoulder, says to Kara, "And you think this is where I came from?" Kara answers, "Well, I think a mad scientist lady wanting a secluded area to perform experiments. This bunker would seem like prime real estate." Angel, turning the charm back on, says, You know, Kara, it means a lot that you are helping us like this. Maybe afterwards, you and I could. Kira says, "Please call me Sheriff." Angel says, "Even better." A light comes on. Jimmy says, "Lights are on." Either motion activated or standing in front of a closed door. Kira finishes, or someone knows we're here. A voice can be heard beyond the door. Ah, the prodigal son has returned. The next page, Jimmy, Kira, and Angel walk through the doorway, greeted by a blue woman. Jimmy says, "Miss Sinister." Miss Sinister says, "I knew you would return to the scene of the crime sooner or later." Multiples of Miss Sinister can be seen, and she says, "I'm quite busy and have little time to entertain guests these days, and even less time to answer questions. I'm afraid this is a pre recorded message and is triggered when someone of your genetic makeup approaches. Since there are so few in the world with your particular genometric, consider this rarefied air." Miss Sinister's AI getting closer to Jimmy, she says, "You know what makes mutants of your world so special, Jimmy? It took me time to fit the pieces of the puzzle together, but when I did, I was absolutely giddy." Close up of of recorded AI of Miss Sinister, she says, "The mutants on your world are man made. They're the result of pseudoscientific tampering that makes a girl's heart all pitter pattery." The next page, still down in the bunker, Angel presses a button. The recording disappears. But before it does, Miss Sinister, I'm saying is more than. But before it does, Miss Sinister says, "You're more than a. What I'm saying, Jimmy, is you're more than just a weapon. That's why I was so willing to let you go. I've already harvested what I needed from you. The seeds of the mother vein has have been planted, my dear, and it is growing." Jimmy, looking around puzzled by her sudden disappearance, says, "Where'd she go?" Angel says, "She was just messing with your head, Jimmy. It's what people like her do. So I put her on pause. Just with one click of a button, I defeated Miss Sinister all by myself." Sheriff, Sheriff Kira shines her flashlight at something and says, Guys, I don't think we're alone here." The next page, still in the bunker, in the room where they just listened to Miss Sinister's pre-recorded message, they move in closer to the thing Sheriff Kira had just shown her flashlight on. She continues, "That Sinister lady left us a present." Jimmy says, "Who is he? Another world mutant like me?" Angel, looking up at the behemoth that lay before them, replies, "No, I know him. That's the Blob." Jimmy with his claws out. Angel says, "Whoa, Jimmy, let's not do anything rash here." A close up of Angel. Behind him, the Blob awakens and reaches out. Angel says, "What? What is it? What's wrong with you two?" The next page, back to Madripoor. The skyline of Madripoor shows. In the corner, Jean says, "Scott, do you want to tell me what's wrong?" Jean and Scott enter a restaurant. Scott says, "Our friends are being held captive by magical freaks. What else do you need to know, Jean?" Jean says, "That's not what I'm talking about. You barely said a word to me since we teleported from the mansion." Scott asks, looking back at Jean, "Why didn't I know about pickles? Right now, our brains are so tangled up, we pretty much know what each other's thinking all the time." Walking further into the restaurant, "But I didn't know about pickles until after we ported. It makes me wonder what else you're hiding from me." The customers start running out of the room. Jean, looking at Scott, says, "Scott, I'm not trying to hide anything from you. We need to understand how to partition our thoughts. Otherwise, we are going to be two people with one brain." Scott says, "Get it? Scott says, got it. I just thought you might let me in on what you were planning. Scott and Jean look toward a voice that says, what did we tell you about dropping by unannounced? The, the next page, we see the voice belongs to the leader of the Rakasha, the mutant protectors of Madripoor. He says, we consider you friends, but we needed to set some boundaries. Our customers expect a certain level of privacy and protection when they come here. Scott points to Jean standing beside him with pickles on her shoulder, a smirk on his face. It was her idea. Jean, face to face with Noriro, the leader of the Akasha, and says, Noriro, we need your help. Noriro replies, why else would you be paying us a visit? What is it you need? A close up of Jean, a close up on Jean, a look of determination on her face, pickles on her shoulder still, says, I got a bit of a pest problem. How would you guys like to kick a bunch of demons out of our house? The next page, back at the Xmen mansion, the X-Men wrapped in cocoons of some sort, but conscious. Magneto says, whatever scheme you have cooking up, Madeline, you have made a grave mistake attacking us in our home. The Goblin Queen replies, oh, Magneto, please. You know as well as I that neither of us has a home, at least not a real one. And don't make it sound like I am unwelcome. Resting her elbow on the back of Beast, her head in her hand, she says, I'm an invited guest, and connections to the arcane have diminished since I arrived on this world. But your dear Beast here was a conduit for my spellcraft. Moving closer to Magneto, getting into the face of Magneto, the Goblin Queen says, and before you try dropping a building on me or whatever, I should warn you, these are volcanic spears of Rexagarth. If you try to use your powers, it will fill your every pore with magma. Standing in the middle of a pentagram, she says, of course they have the bonus of feeding off your feelings of hurt and loss, the betrayal, further fueling my magic. I'll need every drop of pain I can muster for a summoning of this scale. Polaris, in one of the spires of magma, says, what are you up to, you psychotic witch? What are you summoning? The Goblin Queen, looking back at Polaris, says, well, since you asked so sweetly, Polaris. The next page, the Goblin Queen is standing in the pentagram, the demons around her. The fire forms images of the thing she is summoning. And she says, since the beginning of time and space, the Goblin Queen has existed on many planes of reality. Sometimes she is the conqueror. Sometimes she is the serpent in the garden. But in all cases, she finds herself isolated. Well, my sisters need not be alone. I need not be alone. With dear Henry's assistance, I shall call them to my side, and together who knows what terrible feats of magic we will compose. A close up on the Goblin Queen, call it a cure of loneliness. Bobby Drake says, that is the most pathetic thing I've ever heard. And that's coming from a guy calling his boyfriend 104 times in a row just yesterday. Iceman trying to reason with Henry. Come on, Hank, you can't be buying into all this. Let me summon alternate universe demon chicks so you don't cry into my pillow at night. Nonsense. Why are you helping her? Amused by Iceman's pleas, the Goblin Queen says, you say it as if he had a choice. Iceman. He may have at one time, but not anymore. A close up of Bloodstorm, the Goblin Queen says, Henry McCoy is my creature now. The next page, narration for Bloodstorm begins. The plight of the beast tethered to a cruel master. So familiar to me. A close up on Beast. His narration begins. My name's Henry McCoy, And I'm here because I betrayed my friends. All because my pride got the better of me. Back to Bloodstorm's narration. I can see it in his eyes. He is screaming inside. He is a prisoner in his own body, just as I was. And though it would mean sacrificing that which I hold most dear, I will set him free. Alright, folks, that is my spoiler, non spoiler review of number 11, Xmen Blue. Thank you for viewing. I hope you enjoyed. Um, this probably wasn't one of my best reviews, but hopefully you still enjoyed yourself in it. Anyway, subscribe if you haven't. Subscribe if you haven't. Comment. I will try to get back to you as soon as I can. Anyway, to all of you, I'll see you on the other side.